So, as can be seen in that video about Adair, it's a balancing act between the task, the team, and the individuals. And Adair also noted in his theory that there were 8 key functions that the leader would be providing or responsible for. The first was defining the task, setting clear objectives using SMART. The second was planning, looking at alternative ways, having a contingency plan in case there was any problems. The third was briefing the team, making sure that it was creating a team climate, fostering that they were all going to work together and that individuals wouldn't go off on their own. The fourth was controlling what happens and being efficient in terms of getting the results and making sure that they weren't wasting resources. The fifth was evaluating the results and assessing the consequences and identifying how performance could be improved. The next was motivating individuals, making sure that everyone's rewards and incentives were in place and that he was getting the internal motivation that was needed for people to buy into it. The seventh was about organising people and making sure that there was good time management, that people were being developed and that there was delegation. And the eighth was setting an example and making sure that there was recognition for people and that observing what their leaders do and copying what they do. So let's take a look now at Hershey and Blanchard, which is a situational theory. It's based around the maturity level of the team and their expertise, and the concept therefore is that you adapt your style to meet that. It can work in 2 ways. It can tell you what type of leader you should be depending on what you see in your team, and it can also help you to support your team in the best way once you realize what their sort of level is or where they're going, and you can control it as it goes forward. So basically, as we can see from this graphic, it's the maturity level of your team is equal to the style that you adopt. So down the right we have 4 styles that Hershey and Blanchard came up with. We've got A, telling, which is about being very autocratic, as we mentioned before. We've got B, selling, which is about being autocratic but communicating a little bit and trying to bring people on board, so developing them. We've got C, which is participative, which is really about providing less direction, building that relationship, using rapport, sharing responsibility, giving constructive feedback. And then D, delegating, where we entrust them with the responsibility, but we still monitor them, but we don't interfere or we don't intervene. We marry that to whichever side. So, for example, you would be using a telling autocratic style where you had a low confidence team with low skills and they're not willing to take that responsibility or they're not willing to put in the work. The selling would be to the same. They're low in skills and confidence and they're not necessarily willing to come forward, but they're willing to try. So with that bit of bringing them on board and trying to develop them and selling to them, you might be able to take them to the next stage. The next one is a highly skilled team that are confident in their ability. They've got a willingness to work, but they won't take the responsibility. In that, you need to be participative. You just need to be sharing with them to sort of try and draw out of them. And the final one, where they're highly skilled and confident in their ability, they've got the willingness to take work and a willingness to take the responsibility, is where you'd be delegating to them and just giving them, entrusting them with that responsibility and allowing them to move forward and just monitor them, not interfering too much. As you can see, it's a natural way of either adapting to their skills if you've got a ready-made team, or in trying to take them through the stages of A, B, C, D as you develop that team moving forward. So the next model we're looking at is Tannenbaum-Schmidt's continuum. The leadership continuum was developed by Robert Tannenbaum and Warren Schmidt in 1957-58. It was updated later in the 70s, and it offers a range of control and a move of control between the leader and the subordinates. So one end autocratic, at the other end free rein for the subordinates. And they within that offered a group of 7 approaches. The approaches they said we could offer went from the scale on the left-hand side of 1, in that the leader tells people, very autocratic, now might seem unfashionable, but if you had a team that was low on confidence, no commitment, then you might use this, and then you would use it less and less. The second one they talked about was the leader selling an approach. So the leader is still the driving force, but they're letting the team understand why and what they are doing, but they're still directing them. They then talked about testing, the leader testing people, where they explain the problem, they try and get people to come up with ideas and get on board, but they still maintain the authority, although the door is left open for people to start putting forward their ideas, adding their thoughts. They then went to the middle one, which was consult, which is a change of language where the leader starts to talk about less I and more we, and we invite suggestions and try and bring people forward. 5, where the leader joins and starts getting involved. How can we solve this? What do you think we could do? It's a pivotal point as he starts to move to leader delegates, where it's not about we, it's actually become you, and they start giving responsibility to the team to find solutions. And finally, it sounds bad, but abdicates, where I'm here if you need me. The team has full responsibility for identifying, analysing, resolving the problem, but the accountability still stays with the leader. And the idea was that they said we should be ranging up and down this spectrum, dependent on the team, the situation, the individuals we have, and we should vary it. So you could be sliding up and down this scale as you lead your team. The next one we're looking at is Goldman's theory, attributed to Daniel Goldman, 2002, based on emotional intelligence of the leader and the impact that will have on the emotions of the group. As you can see in this table, the ones in red are seen as the negative ones. Visionary, coaching style, affiliative, democratic, all promote harmony and positivity to the employees and the team, whereas pace setting and commanding are seen as to create tension and should be used sparingly and only in the situation specific, particularly for commanding. In this table, you can see it talks about some of the traits or competencies that the manager has, and then talks about the phrase or style that might come with that, just to give a feeling of what they mean by pace setting or command. As you see, commanding, do what I say. And then finally, it talks about the situations it's best for. So visionary, where you need a new direction, where there's changes required. Coaching goes with, explains itself, need to improve development, long-term capabilities. Affiliative, when you've got to get in there and be with the people and try and motivate the team or change things, or in stressful periods. Democratic obviously speaks for itself. Pace setting is about quick, getting things done, and can work with a highly motivated team who are there and know what they need to do. And then commanding, which really, as we've said in the past, is a bit like authoritarian, really crisis situations or where the team are unresponsive or the individuals. But the theory was based on marrying the emotional intelligence of the manager against the emotional effect it would have on the team. Robert House's theory from the 1970s is basically what they call a path goal theory, based on specifying the leader's style or behaviour that best suits or fits with the employee and the work environment, the path to the goal. It works on the principle that the right goal increases the employee's motivation, empowerment and satisfaction, so therefore making them much, much more productive. The key to this is making sure that we find out what goal the employee values, not just what we value, and what we can and how we can support them. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So first of all, we need to consider the individual. We all try and interpret what our manager or leader's behavior is, and unless, of course, we have a great relationship and we know exactly, we have to guess it from what we see about their degree of structure, the way they affiliate with us, our perceived level of their skills, knowledge and experience, and their desire to control us. For example, if you have a boss that micromanages you or counterminds your decisions, it makes us feel less motivated. Therefore, as a leader, we need to make sure we're trying to interpret or understand what our employees are like so that we can manage them well. So we need to be thinking about their experience, what their levels of confidence are, what their abilities are, and what their locus of control is. Secondly, we need to think about the task or the environment. We need to think about potential obstacles and find the best route for that path to the goal. We need to make sure we're looking at the design of the task and make sure that, for example, it's not ambiguous and that it's not too extremely difficult or too easy. We need to make sure that we're looking at the level of authority depending on the task. Are we providing the authority? Have they got some of the control or all of the control? And then finally, we need to be thinking about the team. Is the team supportive of the individual? Do they work cohesively? Is there an esprit de corps? Do they provide that sort of enthusiasm, or could some of the team members end up demotivating other people? So again, it's about considerations and taking into account factors. So we need to take into account the factors about the individual that we're talking about or working with. We need to take into account the factors to do with the task and the environment that person's in. And from that, we can choose a leadership style. And House worked with someone called Mitchell later on and came up with directive, supportive, participative. And we've talked about those sort of areas. And it's about using things such as the continuum, Tannenbaum and Schmidt, to sort of decide where we're going to plump for our best leadership style that'll motivate that staff member. The theory is based on choosing that right leadership style so that we can get the right, and about selecting the right goal and motivation for the employee, the individual, and all the team. And the leader has to use his skills to try and work out that so that they can change or adapt their own behavior and style depending on the situation. We'll look a little bit more at motivation in session 2. Now we look at Vroom-Yetton, and this concept is based around decision making. That process then leading to selecting a leadership style. It was developed on the back of the decision making process, and the leadership styles were added, and it basis of using a set of 8 predetermined question areas which lead you to choosing a path, and then as they added on, selecting a specific leadership styles. So the questions are in 8 areas. They are just areas as well, not specific questions. So it's up to you to decide as the leader what the exact questions are based on the situation before you decide your leadership approach. But the areas are quality requirement. So is it important that there's a high quality decision, or is it just something for a quick fix, say? What is the commitment required? Does the team need to be fully committed, or is it just something they can do? Leaders' information. Do you have enough information to make the decision on your own, or are you going to need the input from other people? What's the problem structure? What is it like? Is it simple, political? Is it a complicated, involved problem? What's the commitment probability? So if you make a decision, will the team support you and fully commit? What's the goal congruence? Similar to that, the goal of the team, is it shared goal? Will everybody back that goal? What's the subordinate conflict likely to be? Is the decision likely to cause conflict between you and between the team? And what's the subordinate information like? Do the subordinates have sufficient information to make a high quality decision if you let them get involved? So once you have answers to your questions, and they're simple yes or no, so it's a quite quick, simple process, you plot them through a map, chart, and as you can see, leading to a destination. As you can see, the blue and the red are different, and you do not need to consider all the questions from all 8 categories. You choose which is relevant, and you choose what you want to use. So with the path plotted, you end up at the end there where you see A2, G2, C2 with a code. Yes, this theory has a lot of codes, but it is really quite simple, and once you get to know it, and you will do that researching it further, you'll realise that they just basically categorise leadership into 5 areas. So 5 styles. Autocratic was split into 2, A1 and A2. Consultative was split into 2, C1 and C2. And collaborative was called G2 because obviously it would have conflicted with C2. And really they were just fine-tuning on the autocratic. The first, A1, was you use the information you already have and you make a decision and you don't require input from the team, so full autocratic. A2, you consult with your team about little bits of information because you might not know it, and then you make a final decision. So it's a little bit like the sell-tell that we looked at in others. C1, consultative, you inform your team there is a decision, you ask for their opinions, but you don't bring them all together into one meeting and you make the final decision. So you do it separately, so you're keeping the power, I suppose, more. And in consultative, C2, you get your team together to discuss it, and you seek their suggestions before you make a final decision. And almost the full collaborative was you work with your team to get a group consensus. So really you're just a facilitator, so it's almost full reign delegative. In fact, it's going towards laissez-faire, but you do keep an involvement because you do work with the team to facilitate it. So that's Frumieton. Seems quite complicated, but actually quite straightforward in yes, no to the end. So whatever style or theory you decide is best, it needs to be the best for the task that you're involved in, the situation and your traits, and the team you have at your disposal. You need to consider all these situations, and they will be impacted by the culture that exists within your organisation. And we'll start looking at that shortly. Right then, so we've reached the first sort of midway point of this first session. I just want you to watch this video by a very good presenter, John Maxwell, about 5 levels of leadership, sort of his interpretation, and also concentrate on the fact that he talks about how it might be to do with the organisational culture or what develops because of the way people lead. And then there's an activity that I'd like you to look at, and that asks you to think about different situations or teams that you may need to lead, considering things such as projects, short-term teams, ongoing usual business tasks, working in multiple or remote teams, different cultures and countries, teams with different levels of experience or expertise, how teams are different during times of stress and change and emergency situations. And then it asks you to consider and use what we talked about, think about what styles might be appropriate to run. And if you don't currently do it, think about how you would or how someone else within your organisation does.